Time for another Rum and Real Estate, episode 16. We are going to talk today about the elephant in the room and actually out on the street, and has been in the news for probably 2 years now. The St. George Incorporation vote that's coming up. Early voting starts tomorrow, with the actual election being on the 12th. Before we begin, I always save for social media one political post per year. And usually it's more of just a thought-provoking type thing, but I'd never discuss politics on Facebook or social media or Twitter or Instagram, because I feel like that there's enough of that stuff floating around out there already. I prefer just to let's just have some fun. But what I want to do today, and I even have notes because I thought this was pretty important, is just my view on this tends to run a little different in that it's more of what's the word I want to look for? It's more of an overarching I have it written here. Really where my view on this comes from the fact that perception is reality. And right now, before I keep going, my reality right now is Kraken rum. I ran out of my Zafra, so I got to wait till I get to Houston again to get some more. So anyway, it's still Friday. Cheers. But what I wrote down here was that, the perception a lot of times is reality, and and perception is always to the person. So I can perceive something this way, and someone right next to me could be looking at the same thing and see it a completely different way. And this is something that I learned in a couple classes that it really is what makes, politics very difficult in some cases, because everyone has their experiences, and their upbringing, their education changes their perception of what is actually out there. And in this case for St. George and the Incorporation, I can go back real quick with my parents. They moved from the Bronx in 1970 to Baton Rouge when it was mostly a rural area. They lived in Southeast Baton Rouge for a while, and in 1982, after my brothers and I were born, moved to Connecticut, and then came back in 1992. And, listening to my father talk about, especially with education, because in Baton Rouge, it just seems to me, and again, perception has always been that Baton Rouge has always struggled to create a public school system that was a desirable one. And to the point that where my parents moved back in 92, my middle brother and I, we were in private school. And for me, going to public school in Connecticut up until that point was kind of a different deal. I was like, why am I going to the school that's in the neighborhood? I could walk there. And it wasn't until later on, as we start to, as we grow older, learning more about, how the education system, how parish and city-run education systems work, but not so much the details, but just in general, you have, it just seems to me that, for Baton Rouge, from the time my parents got here in the 70s, left and came back, it's really had about 40 plus years to try and make it a desirable place to have an education system for parents who have children that live within the parish, or in that time, it was just, Incorporated East Baton Rouge, and that was it back in the 70s. So it continues, though, to languish behind the surrounding areas. So what did we see? We saw 10, 12 years ago, Central, with the attempt to create a new school system, incorporated and made a city. So they have a new school system, and by accounts, it is a higher ranked school district than East Baton Rouge Parish School District is. You have the Zachary School District. There's a lot of development that's going on in Zachary in the last 5 to 8 years. Even since I've been in just the time I've been in real estate, Zachary has been a desirable place to go. Granted, if you're willing to travel, it's a little further away than, say, Prairieville is. But people moved out there for a schooling system within the parish. So then we also have, naturally we have Ascension Parish, the explosion of Ascension Parish population, and the school systems ranked there, usually in the top 5 within the state. And Livingston Parish is usually up there in the top, top 25 percentile as well. So perception is reality. So you have Baton Rouge and you have all these other areas surrounding the city, surrounding the parish, that are creating school systems that are performing better than East Baton Rouge. I am not going to sit here and try and attempt to answer why that is. I am not in politics. I am not in education. Again, I feel like my perception is maybe a little more broad, and just going back to where if there's a system that's in place, or a government that's in place for 40 years and we can't seem to see some significant improvement in the way of ranking against your peers, which is really the data that we have to go with. I feel like that with the incorporation effort that started 2 years ago, it was really just about an attempt to, sorry about that. It's the way I see it is, maybe at some point we just have to give it a shot. And, let's try something new. If we've kept doing the same thing over and over again, not just in schools, but anything, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing and expecting different results. I'm to the point personally where, although my children are in private schools where I went to school and I have a great affinity for Most Blessed Sacrament School, I went to Catholic and Dana went to Bishop Sullivan or St. Michael. The idea that we've been trying to do the same thing as a parish, a city parish form of government with the school system, and it has not improved to the point where it would bring people back in. I can see where it's just, let's just try something new. We don't know unless we try. And what we're seeing is basic civil democracy in action. The people of this section of the parish where I live now, and for the first incorporation event, I lived in Prairieville, so I didn't have any skin in the game, but it was fascinating to watch how that went down, because it got pretty vicious politically, and to know that I think they were short like 71 signatures out of like 18,000. So, and all the legislative wrangling that went on to put this process in check, what we're seeing is what the law and democracy is designed to do. If there's something that if enough people want to see something changed, give them the opportunity to vote. This St. George Incorporation could get to the point where as long they cannot get the vote. The point I think a lot of people are having, what's driving, at least what people told me privately, is that we just want the opportunity to vote. It doesn't mean it's going to pass. And I think that's what's getting lost a lot here, is that it could go to the ballot, and if it doesn't get 51%, then the measure fails. And that's where I would like to see, if it passes, where this section of the parish has voted to try something new. If it doesn't pass, it means that while there is a good sentiment for it, if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. And it's something that I am really interested to see, because I think there are things that are floating out there that I can see could be really good for the incorporation effort. But and when it comes to real estate, it's rum in real estate. So what does this mean for real estate? And I see a lot of billboards that have popped up over here on Tiger Bend and Corsi. It just says, no higher taxes, no St. George. And I think that can be extremely misleading, whether you believe those that are leading up the incorporation effort or those who oppose it. What does higher taxes mean? The incorporation leaders are saying we're not, no new taxes are going to be, the budget doesn't show that there should be any new taxes. Okay, I'm fine with that. Although I am smart enough to understand that governments are what they are, and it's up to the people to hold those people accountable to that if taxes are to be raised. That being said, my personal opinion is that I am okay with higher taxes if I get a chance to vote on it, and if there is actual results, material improvement. If I'm voting for a tax over here and in 2 or 3 years I can see that tax in action, that's what it's for. And I think part of what a lot of the area around here is frustrated with, that spurred this whole thing, is that a lot of taxes are being paid, and most of that money, or a significant portion of that money, is not being spent back in our section of the parish. Again, I don't know the numbers. The perception is out there, though. And if enough people perceive it, and that is their reality, then we end up with a situation where the early voting starts tomorrow on whether to create a new city. The other higher tax issue when it comes to real estate is that I see kind of as a good thing. Well, you could have higher taxes because of, higher property taxes. Well, property taxes don't go up unless two things happen. A, someone votes for a new higher tax, which we just discussed. It shouldn't be the case, and I don't know if the proponents or supporters of St. George would approve of it. Second, high property taxes happen when properties appreciate. Isn't that a good thing? When the first Incorporation event was going on in 2015, there was a number that was floating around in the realtor community that perhaps that property values in the area over that span of the transition could go as high as 10% property value appreciation, because of the anticipation of people moving in to take advantage of what would become new schools, better roads, more localized central government that could be held more accountable. I don't know what that number is this time. It all depends on markets. However, in the last year or so, there have been many more of my clients that have asked me if a particular home in this side of town is going to be in the St. George area or not. So it's still top of mind. And when it comes to buying, if someone has small children that's looking to move to Baton Rouge because of a job, but maybe concerned about the St. George area, the schools, but they have asked me that question. And so I'm just relaying that to you, that I get these questions myself. In the end, what I want to say here is I support the St. George movement, as I mentioned, if for no other reason to let's give it a shot. I don't think there's anything really to, as basic services are going to be where we are. And as long as if I take care of my business personally for my family, it really doesn't matter if I'm St. George, from East Baton Rouge, but I can see where a change in how this local area is run could be really beneficial to everybody that lives in the area. And with that, I am going to end my one political post for the year. I appreciate any comments. I appreciate you guys watching. Amanda, Jody, Shane, Brandon. If you guys have any comments, definitely leave them down below. I certainly like to have a civil conversation about this if anybody wants to. Cheers. Enjoy the bye week, and I will see you guys next week.